We all Rangers, yeah, you know it's true.
Hello and welcome to Dragon Song, the one and the only podcast exclusively for Breath of Fire fans across the world. We're your hosts, I'm Jordan.
And I'm Livnat.
And today we're talking about something very fun and very light. We're simply talking about our favorite characters from the series. And there's a good reason for that. As we've mentioned before, we think that the characters of Breath of Fire are a big part of the reason that this series is so special. And we just want to take a minute to kind of celebrate our faves from each of the games. We're going to be going through one by one every game in the series except for Breath of Fire 6 because neither of us played it. We don't live in Japan. Neither of us are fluent in Japanese, and you know how that goes. And not a whole lot of people were really excited to play that one anyway, but that's a story for another day. In any event, 1 through 5, we're going through game by game, and then at the end, we're going to decide which character is our very favorite overall. And we're also going to be talking about which characters are your favorites. We've fielded this question on Twitter and on Discord, got a lot of great responses, and we're going to be going through all of that. So let's start with the first game, and Livnat, since you are more of a fan of the first game, who's your fave?
Oh my god, I almost love everyone. Almost. The only character that I didn't like in Breath of Fire 1 was Momo, because I felt it was too late to the party and kind of useless, and I never used him too much. I mean, he's cute, he has cute design, just I never get the time to connect with him. So
he did come a bit too late, but I liked him a lot. He is cute. Got a really, really adorable design.
He is
and he
cute,
just kind of tugs at your heartstrings with this little mole family, you know?
Yeah, it was too late. So we have the first Ryu from Breath of Fire 1, which at first I thought it was a girl, and it was a big deal to me because I was like, oh my god, back in the days, a girl, a main character in a game, and later I find out he actually is a guy. But then came Nina, who became my all-time favorite character in our different alteration throughout the series. And then you have Bo, and I think he's the most awesome archer in the game. I especially love his shamanized form, Shin. And then you get Karen, who is also pretty slick with his shamanized form. And you have Ox, who is the predator of Ren, but he's also like a family guy, so that was pretty cute touch. We have the Sassy Days, or Blue, as she appeared in the game. And we have Gobi, the greedy merchant. He's a fish guy, but he's a little bit too greedy for the Melino clan. And we ended up getting Momo, who is like trapped in his own dreams. But the fun part doesn't even stop there, because all the other characters, the NPCs and the villains, are pretty cool as well.
There's some really great NPCs in the first game, for sure.
Yes. Let's start with the bad guys. First of all, we have Miria/Tyr, who is like dressed as Alice from Wonderland, and she's appears so innocent and pure. But then she turns into aliens kind of monster, and she's kind of very twisted, and she enjoys suffering. And then we have Emperor Zorgon, or Zog, and he actually kind of idealist man. He actually has something in mind. He doesn't look too concerned about the goddess, but he definitely wants to achieve his goal, which is world domination. And he's appeared a lot more respectful than Jade or Jadus, who is like his lieutenant minion, but he ended up, of course, betraying his master, his emperor, because he wanted the power of the goddess to himself. And he also the guy who is responsible to kidnap Sarah, who is another great NPC. She's like the toughest, coolest Dragon of Light character. Later will reappear in a different Breath of Fire series, like Breath of Fire 2, where she's like more Valerie type of character. She's like the sister, but more like a mother figure to the Ryu from the first game. And we have Carl, or Carla, who is like the demoness general. And there's a lot of cool scenes between her and Nina and Days and the Queen of Toonland, which is kind of fun. We have Goda, who is another Vessel, we have Mott, and we have a lot of great characters for this game, you know? So many of them.
There are some great characters. My favorite playable character is Ox, and you're going to see that theme going forward. I like, the big, strong, kind of strong silent types. And I relate to him, perhaps. I like that he is, like you said, a family man. His impetus for getting into the fight is that, his wife is taken captive, and he is persuaded to kind of continue along with the heroes by his wife after she's rescued. So I like that he has a real reason to fight, and it's not just out of some kind of a naive, JRPG, knee-jerk default desire to save the world. He's actually fighting for something. He, essentially, he doesn't want what happened to him and his wife to happen to anyone else, and he wants to put an end to all of this. And I really respect that. And just in terms of being a playable character, again, I like the, hard-hitting, slow, type of deal. And like Livnat suggested, in his merged form, obviously he contributes to being one of the most powerful members of the game, like, in game. In terms of NPCs, my favorite is definitely Curl. And I call her an NPC rather than a villain because although she's obviously aligned with the evil forces of the game, I don't see her as being truly evil or villainous. Obviously, she's a pretty complex character and a very sympathetic one. I don't think that there are too many people who have played the game who didn't find the story of Alan and Curl to be at least somewhat touching, because anyone who has ever felt like they didn't belong can relate to Curl. Her story is a really genuinely sad and tragic one. And I often find that, and I'm just being honest here, that when characters sacrifice themselves in JRPGs, it can come across as very melodramatic and not very believable. I found Curl's fate to be completely believable because she didn't feel like she had a lot of worth, and she wanted to have a kind of life, and she, obviously she cared about Alan, but she felt like she wasn't deserving of that life and that existence, and I found it really genuinely sad. So Curl is definitely my favorite NPC, just in terms of non-playable characters. My favorite villain is probably either Jade or Tyr/Miria herself. And I would add a caveat to that in terms of just looking at Breath of Fire 1 in a vacuum, if I hadn't played any of the other games, I would probably find Jade to be the most interesting, or maybe Moat. But having played 2 and 3 and looking back, I find Tyr more fascinating. And that's because obviously she gets a bit more character development in later games. She's somewhat fun in the first game, but we don't get to see a lot of her at this point. So I'd probably roll with Jade again if we were just talking about 1, but overall I'd have to say Tyr/Miria.
Also, shout out to the Wizard of Karma, because he had a pretty big epic moment there.
He was definitely memorable. Had a great design too. I mean, got creepy as hell. Exactly. Of course, they reused the sprite throughout the game, but it didn't take away from the power of the first time that you see it. Because it's like, holy crap, the guy looks really sinister. Okay, so Livnat, who are your favorite characters? Who's your overall fave? You got to pin down one, and then go down the list a little bit.
Oh my god. Then probably Nina, and then definitely Days. Jade.
Why is Nina your favorite?
Because she has wings and she's like an angel, but at the same time she's kind of spunky brat, and she doesn't take like anything for granted, and she's just very feisty. She's not very princess-like, so that's pretty cool. I don't think I've seen a character like her back when I first was introduced to her. I was new to JRPGs by that time, and I just love the character, especially when she's flying in the battles, and she's the best healer in the game, so she's always useful. So yeah, I really, really digged her. right from the start. And I guess Days / Blue, because like again she has a very tough personality and she's like playful, best magician in the game, but she dies a lot, which kind of frustrating. But when kind of Nina is kind of cool, she can actually fight a little bit. Then Jade, because he's my favorite villains. And I guess
Because you find
those
him
are my
hot, right?
top. Yeah, he's hot.
You'll find this to be a very common theme, throughout the podcast here, that Livnat is very drawn towards a lot of the characters for, somewhat sinister reasons. But, I tease her about it, but I get it, Jade's a badass.
Gotta love the fairies from the first game too. Honorable mention. They were still like being made in the progress. They were pulled back from the second game, I guess because they didn't know exactly what to do with them. But they came back for free. I would admit I never really liked the way they changed them to being free because they appeared more different and not as like respectful, but it is what it is. A character and design do get evolved through the ages, so that's okay.
And speaking of 2, let's go into our favorites from, Breath of Fire 2. It's the first game that I played, and I think I may have mentioned that before, so it has a special place in my heart, and I feel more strongly about the characters from 2 than I do any other game, so I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm a little biased with this one. My fave is Rand. Again, I like the, strong silent types, and I love the way that Rand is introduced. When you meet him in Corsair, he comes across as, to me, fairly intimidating. He's this big ass armadillo man, standing at the bar. He seems like he's got it all together, and he's kind of involved in this shady, Coliseum business going on. He'll let you know about Baba and Kat and all of this and how you can get involved in it. And then the character starts to take a bit of a turn when you discover the plot to poison Kat and, ultimately yourself. And it becomes evident that he has, a bit of a heart of gold. And he really helps you out when you are in the process of rebuilding the ruins at Township. He stays behind with Nero to, help with the construction. And he's also just really fun in combat, right? I mean, let's face it, he's got a great design. I loved his whole color scheme. He's got a great costume. He has that almost kind of a gladiatorial look, right? It's like it looks sort of Roman. And, let's point out for a minute here that the character design in Breath of Fire 2 is just really phenomenal. I mean, I think that's part of what makes the game so memorable for a lot of people. But Rand looks great. He looks great in combat too. I love, the attack animation, kind of winding up and giving them the big uppercut. I love his magic stance when he sort of, raises his arm up and calls down the thunder or the earthquake or whatever. And he can roll. I mean, look, let's face it, for anyone who's played 2, I love the game, but getting around the world map can be a big pain in the ass, and Rand makes that a lot easier. Now, you got to be able to control the roll well, and that's a little bit difficult, but it's a really cool option to have, and it's fun. To me, it makes the game feel a bit different than any other game in the series, and in fact, most JRPGs. And of course, sorry, spoilers here if you haven't played the game. Rand's ultimate arc is really fascinating because we find out that despite his kind of tough guy demeanor, he's really just a simple farm boy at heart. He comes from farm town, and he has a very, shall we say, strained relationship with his mother. He's got, real mommy issues. His mom is a badass who doesn't take any shit from anyone. And she's in the process of dealing with the Church of Evrai. And, things don't go so well for her. And we all know how that plays out if you've played the games. If you haven't, I won't go into too much detail about it, but suffice to say, it ends very tragically for Rand and his mother. And it's one of the more memorable scenes in the game. I don't think that anyone who's played it can ever forget that. And it's a big part of the reason why I find Rand to be the most compelling character in 2. Now, I love Jean as well. Jean is an absolute hoot. He is, in my mind, without a doubt, the funniest character in JRPG history. There's no one like Jean. He is completely aloof, completely apathetic. He doesn't care about anything except singing and painting art and, his dear sister. He cares about her. And he is a lover. He's a typical, French stereotype. The guy is a complete horn dog, and his arc with Nemufu is both hilarious and touching, and I just love it. So Jean's a very close second. I love that character. I find Spar really interesting. Obviously, Spar is fascinating on a number of levels. I love the whole Grassman element. That's always a cool character archetype for me. The idea that the world of trees is alive and that he's this sentient, sort of long-living plant with this kind of an inhuman outlook on the world. Really love the character. And in terms of NPCs, that's a tough choice because there are a lot of really good ones. Who? Let me think about this. Let me put it to Livnat. Livnat, who are your favorite characters?
Let's start with my favorite NPC. My favorite NPC gotta be the landlord of Ryu and Bo's mansion.
Oh,
Poor
he's great.
girl
Oh my
never
god.
got the money back for sure. And of course you have, oh god, I'm blinking on her name, Sylvia, who has a crush for Bo. And the elder.
She's part of the Rangers Guild, if you're not too familiar with the character.
She's like the secretary, seems like. And
Yeah.
you have the elder of the ranger who's very amusing. And of course the carpenter NPCs who shout out to you the most famous line, "I did it, idiot," which is great. And the red hair lady that says, "Are you, are you, are you Ranger? You are working hard. Are you working hard, Rangers?"
She really cares about the Rangers and their work ethic. Come on.
Yeah, but I think the top of the list of NPC gotta be Clarice.
Ooh,
Clarice
she's a great one.
Was
Taiga.
amazing. One of the resistance, one of the people fighting against the church, has a flame for Tiga and probably doing more than enough to risk her life for him. My favorite character of Breath of Fire 2, I really love this game. I don't think there was a game who nailed character design and character flow as best as Breath of Fire 2 did. I would argue that there was no need to keep some of them around after their arc was done. Because I didn't feel like they brought along much. Of course, you can play different playthrough because each of them saying different line depending on the situation. But when push come to shove, I don't think a lot of them actually connected too deeply to the plot. So yeah, my top favorite are actually the girls like Nina, Kat, and Days. I always run with this party. Nina with her tragedy, and Kat with her being a lonely stray cat. And we have Days. She's kind of a secret character that you end up getting, but she's very important because it's the same one from the first game. She's been around. She knows what's going on.
Yeah, she's one of the strongest direct links to that whole continuity. She really makes the games feel like they're more connected.
It's pretty
and she's
cool
just hilarious. I mean, first of all, the way that you obtain her is really fun, and of course, it's a great secret because it would be very hard to figure out if you didn't have some kind of a guide or other guidance about it. But her method of being obtained is really fun, and what little dialogue she has is really hilarious because she continues being a sassy drunk who completely flies in the face of the whole typical kind of wizard / goddess stereotype. So great character.
Yeah, and she loved to drink and sleep, so very good. You have Ray, who is semi-villain. Jordan claims that he probably wasn't aware of what happened with Saint Eva. I would say he was aware to a point, or he was in denial. Because there's no way he didn't like know about a lot of things, even though he claims to be. So
I think you have to look
kinda
at his
torn.
upbringing. I mean, he very clearly is at the least in denial, because I think it would be very hard to argue that he is an evil man. I think he believes that what he's doing is right, and he's been very terribly manipulated and corrupted and gaslit. I mean, look at what kind of life he must have led. I mean, the his essential father figure, Habaruku, was, one of the biggest monsters in JRPG history.
Yes.
And it's hard to imagine that anyone could turn out, any better than Ray did in those circumstances. He's
sure.
practically a saint, considering what happened to him and the way that he
sure.
was raised. So, I mean, he really is the mirror of Ryu, and I think that's one of the really beautiful things about Breath of Fire 2. It's one of the strongest points of the plot of Breath of Fire 2 is that you have these two characters who have very parallel lives in many ways, and Ray represents what could have been with Ryu. Of course, Ryu happens to be of the Light Dragon clan, Ray happens to be of the Dark Dragon clan, if I remember correctly. And so there's some cool kind of symbolism there as well, and parallelism. But yeah, probably overall, Ray is my favorite NPC because, there's just, I don't think there's any character more fascinating than he is, but Gainer is very close, Valerie is very close. Both are, of course, Valerie's technically playable, at least momentarily, briefly, but both Gainer and Valerie are very fascinating. I find the whole Dragon Clan in 2 really compelling, the way that they've been kind of mostly driven underground and forgotten in many ways.
I just wonder if why Habaku didn't use Ray to open the gate. That's also something like it seems like both him and Barbaru had kind of like a champion, sort of like bats who would get there first to open the gate. So I just wonder, like, I'm putting it out there, like if there was another idea. Also, regarding on the denial, I mean, gosh, I've seen a lot of people who were living under crazy and strict rules that ended up like doing things against morality because they didn't know better. But it seems like Ray does want to do better. So it's so twisted and weird. Kind of like it.
It is twisted, and that's why I think he's such a compelling character. Again, if one is to consider Ray a villain in the game, then he's my favorite, but I don't see him as a villain. So my favorite villain is Beruberi, and that's not really a question. Beruberi, as you may have heard, or seen, if you follow me on Twitter or my YouTube stuff, I've done some voice acting for the character, and if there's ever an official remake of the game, Capcom, I'm out here. I'd love to do it. Absolutely love the character. He's creepy as hell, scary as hell. He made the intro what it is. I think, in large part, he's what people remember about that game, that just terrible third eye of his slowly opening in the beginning. And he is this really absolute paradigm of a satanic character, and you can't possibly imagine how it could get any more evil than Beruberi. And then you find out that he's not even the big bad, it's Death Evan. And Death Evan I found to be fun, but not as compelling as Beruberi. Beruberi looks better, he's got the better design, the better sound design as well. His laugh in the game is phenomenal. And again, I don't think it gets better than Beruberi as far as villains, but there are some really good villains in 2. August was a huge favorite of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that in terms of being the first demon that you really kind of out and fight in the game, he's phenomenal. I mean, he's just over the top. You could easily see him being played by Tim Curry, right? Like, just like
so
twirling his hair. This evil character, but he's very stylish. He's very dapper. And he appeals to a lot of the worst instincts in all of us. I mean, we as human beings do like to see bloodshed. And I'm sure a lot of us love to watch, MMA and WWE and, NASCAR. And at the end of the day, a lot of that is because there's the potential that people are going to be gruesomely hurt. And that's a little disturbing when you think about it. And that's part of what I find to be so compelling in especially Breath of Fire 2, but throughout the series, is that it really reflects on real problems of humanity, not crystals and, giant space alien demons that become your father or this kind of crazy shit. It's real issues. It's down to earth. We're dealing with characters who are struggling to pay the rent and struggling to put food on the table and who have families, who actually care about their families.
Wants to be thin.
Yes, exactly. We've got issues of weight loss and body image, and it's great stuff. Yeah, and the Queen of Tunnelin's another fun NPC in 2. And again, it's just, you could go down the list. We could talk all day just about 2, the great characters in the game, and not even the playable ones, not even the villains, just the NPCs. Yeah, it's populated by really fun, bright, compelling characters. So, okay, baby, if you had to narrow it down, who are your we're gonna divide this into 3: favorite playable character, favorite NPC, and favorite villain. Who are your faves from 2?
I would go with character that I would keep around in my party, because I don't think they contribute too much to the plot. Because what I'm trying to say is, like, I would go for character that I would keep in my party because I feel like they are most needed in the immediate plot. So that's kind of take off Jean. It's take off Spar. I think Days can be taken off because again the plot could work without her.
So let's just narrow it down. Just name one. Who's your fave?
Okay, Nina, Cat.
Okay, so but I want to focus on that. Nina is your favorite. Why is Nina your favorite?
Because she's amazing. I mean, oh my god, she's dealing with her own trauma and vanishing and not being loved by anyone, but at the same time she's keeping her kind and gentle manner, and she's so perceptive. I think she's the only character that noticed that Patty and Ryu are the same. She noticed that, like, when each dragon power are received, she noticed that. She tells them, I feel that you are stronger. She wants to sacrifice herself for others, but it feels like when she meets Ryu, like, her sense of life worth got higher. She really developed throughout the series from being this really guarded Ice Queen to something more gentle and helping. And the scene with her sister is the most heartbreaking scene in the game, especially when you get so connected to Mina. Okay, so yeah, Nina is top there. Cat, I love her mechanically mostly, but
let me talk about Nina just for a minute too, because I love the character, and obviously the character has huge fan appeal. I mean, I think that if you polled Breath of Fire fans, Nina 2 would be pretty near the top of the list in terms of fan favorites, and there are a lot of reasons for that. I mean, first of all, she's got a great design. She looks the best out of any of the Ninas in the series. Let's just, be honest here. Great color scheme. She's very stylish. Her accessories are really working for her. There's something she's got very piercing eyes. There's kind of a touch of sorrow in the character that we don't have in the other Ninas. Nina 1, like you said, is spunky. So is Nina 3. Nina 4 has that kind of childish, kind of anime innocence about her that I think is appealing to people. But Nina 2 just has this kind of a broader appeal. And I think, to me, a lot of that comes down to the, again, really badass animation and character design in 2. She's got great battle animations. Her attack animation's phenomenal, especially when she casts spells. It just looks fabulous. And
she shows a lot of skills.
She does show a lot of skin, and we know that sex sells, and let's face it, I think that's a big part of the reason that she's probably one of the more popular iterations of Nina.
For sure. She's really pretty too.
Right. But she does have a great arc. I mean, again, I think we can all relate to feeling somewhat left out, and her arc, while it's kind of archetypical in terms of mythological and RPG stories about royal families and kind of the ugly duckling or this sort of a thing, we have something more real there in terms of family dynamics, because I think we can all kind of relate to Nina's relationship with her mother and father. her mother is trying to do the best that she can, but it turns out really tragically. Obviously, as we see with what happens with Mina and Nina herself.
And her father, like, taking it to heart.
Right. And so Nina, Nina's a really compelling character. So okay, you were going to talk about Kat for a minute.
Yes. I think the game kind of missed out on her a little bit, even though she does get a lot of screen time, especially with the Colosseum and later on with the whole Tiger scene where, the character is kind of, like Ryu, is kind of forced to fight for her love, even if you don't find her attractive. That's kind of how the game kind of works. Even Stan kind of remarks that, like, Ryu likes them both. The GBA ending scene, the sad ending scene, has both Kat and Nina being sad. So even the game kind of plays around that you don't know who is the canon like choice that Ryu ultimately made if he did survive the game, which is kind of cool. But you don't know too much about her or her clan, or you don't know like what happened to the felon characters, like what happened to her clan? Why are they scattered? Where are they? Like, what happened? She even does hope to get who she is. She has her whole, like, issues about what her true emotions are, who she is. That's a very touching scene. And she's very fiery, very fisty, great mechanically on the battlefield. Like, you always want Kat around. She can do a lot of action in the game. So she's pretty badass. And she's also, even though I don't find her as attractive as Nina, she's also pretty in her own way.
And her shaman form is phenomenal. Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
the way that she's animated is great. I think she's one of the better characters in terms of just how she kind of works in battle. And her shaman form looks phenomenal. I love that it's so distinct from her normal form. And I agree that she's a really great, really memorable character, and that it's kind of a shame that they didn't do more with her, because I did find that her arc was ultimately a little bit of a letdown in the sense that they didn't do as much with her as they could have, because I felt like they kind of forgot about her in the middle of the game, and then they tried to do the whole Taiga thing, and to me it didn't quite work because they were trying to do too much at once. They were trying to kind of shoehorn his relationship with Claris in there, and that part worked. His scene with Claris in the Great Evil Church was phenomenal, but his bit with Kat, to me, just it made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, Taiga's a bit rapey. Let's face it, he's way too damn overeager and pushy with it.
I kind of like it, but I was I don't know. I like stuff like that.
It felt a little weird to me. It just like. I could see why Kat would be attracted to him on the one hand, because she is very, like you said, very fiery, very aggressive herself. And I could see how she could respond to that kind of a physical approach. But I don't know. Personally, I didn't really fully buy it, and so I just felt kind of bad for Kat. I felt like she deserved more. But
I kind of like it when he is actually the first guy. She doesn't outright like knock him off. She just moved away, so that was a nice touch. Was kind of cute.
Yeah, and again, I could see how she could kind of respond to him, but okay, so you've narrowed down your favorite character. What about your favorite NPC and villain?
Clarice, top one. And then you have Mina. Mina is adorable.
Oh, yeah.
She's just so cute. She's like, I have a sister, so every time I see a sister love or squibbling like that, it really warms my heart. When the little sister is so loving and want to do something for it, like it's something that really touches with me.
That relationship was really, really a beautiful thing about the Fire 2. It was very tender and
believable too.
It was believable, and it really hurt every time that you saw Mina ask Nina, what's wrong? Kind of why are you saying these things, when Nina goes along with the story that she's not part of the family. And okay, so who was your favorite villain?
Habaku.
Oh my god, really? I didn't know that.
He's so bad. He's so bad.
You gotta love to hate him.
It's like, He's so bad. He would do anything he can, manipulate and like stabbing the knife and make fun of, like he would completely deregulate you, like he doesn't care about anything, and at the same time he kind of justify it like for our lord. And there's something so real about it, because I do see people like that in real life, that they think they're so holy than though, even though they hurt and they menace, and I guess because
That's
there's
the
something
thing.
so believable about him.
And he's there from the very beginning. You don't realize it at first, but he's Father Hulk. I mean, he's been carrying on the charade the entire time. And I do think it kind of speaks to, let's face it, the potential evil of organized religion. I mean, that's largely what Breath of Fire 2 is about. Let's face it, it's a critique of the Catholic Church and some of the excesses of the Catholic Church. And Habaruku,
or any other religions, to be honest.
right? Any other religion, but they're specifically talking about the Catholic Church here, of course. And we see in Habaruku a figure who starts early, and that unfortunately, without obviously trying to generalize, because I'm someone who is not overtly critical of faith or a person's choice in terms of religion, but unfortunately, we have seen throughout history that religion can serve to corrupt. It can convince people to do evil things that they might not otherwise do. And Habaruku is a really prime example of that, of how people can be subverted and undermined from an early age. So, okay, we've covered Breath of Fire 2. Let's move on to Livnat's favorite. I'm being facetious here. She can't stand the game. But I'm a fan of it. I'm a big fan. Breath of Fire 3. So, this, in my opinion, is probably the most popular of the Breath of Fire games in terms of the general fandom. Again, I grew up with 2, so it's my fave, but 3 is probably a close second. It's got a great cast of playable characters. My favorite is Gar. Again, I'm gonna get a little repetitive here probably, but Gar takes the strong silent type to the next level because there's a lot more to him. He's got a great design. He looks kind of like a gargoyle or something. I don't know if that's where they're going with his name or not, but that's what he always reminded me of. But great design. He looks like a complete badass. And I love how he's the first guy to kind of stand down Valio and Sunder, in Genmo. I mean, they've been running rampant through the whole game, and they're not really showing a whole lot of fear of anything other than the fact that Ryu might be a zombie for a moment. But they're pretty much uncowed until they meet Gar, and then it's like, all right, this dude's the alpha male, without a question. And, again, we're getting into this issue of how otherwise good people can be compelled to do evil things. And Gar truly believes that what he's doing is right until he begins to question it. And that arc, to me, makes Breath of Fire 3. Breath of Fire 3 is about a young Ryu waking up and not being in control of himself, not being able to control his great power, his destructive and lethal abilities. And the fact that Gar has been convinced that this is a threat to the world, and you can understand why. I mean, if a young whelp can incinerate the people who discovered him, what could a fully grown dragon do if it chose to? And so you can see how Miria's plan worked. And it worked all too well. But
at the same time, it's very manipulative, because Ryu never got the chance to be trained. So
right, of course, and that and that's Gar sees that. I mean, Geist saw it as well, and Geist may be my favorite NPC. He probably is, but Geist saw it as well. But he had a more cynical outlook. He just decided, look, I can't deal with it. I actually really feel for Geist, even though he comes across as a bit of an asshole. I think he very clearly had PTSD. He's trying to hide it, beneath this gruff exterior, but he's this kind of a shriveled, aging warrior, hiding out in a cave somewhere in front of a fire. And I think he's a pretty sad figure. But Gar is definitely my favorite playable character. Ray comes in second. Ray's phenomenal. He could easily be my favorite if Gar weren't such a beast. Because Ray is a beast. He's the ultimate character with a heart of gold who has in this case, very literal beast hiding within him. And the way that they hint at it in the beginning with the new and, that whole childhood arc is really well done. I mean, you know that Ray's a bit of a rascal and there's a bit of danger in him, but you don't know what exactly he is and what he's capable of at this point. And then when you finally see it, it's really genuinely shocking. I mean, I've never seen an RPG personally, and there are a few that I haven't played, but I've never personally played an RPG in which a character's dark side is so convincingly portrayed, because Ray very quickly and believably goes from being this kind of a lovable devil-may-care rogue with his "doesn't that just beat all" catchphrase to being this werebeast who's just rampaging uncontrollably and leaving a very real blood trail behind him. And so I love that character. Peiko, to me, is also really adorable. There's not a whole lot to him other than his relationship with Yggdrasil and his kind of role as a vessel for said character, but he's adorable. I mean, the way that he's introduced brings across one of those really cool ethical dilemmas in Breath of Fire that the series is so good about. And he just, again, looks cute as hell. He's this little onion guy. And how can you not love Peiko?
My favorite character in Breath of Fire 3 is the dolphin. That's it. No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
He is pretty great.
I didn't like this game. I just didn't. I couldn't connect with it. I admit that I came to it after playing 4. But at the same time, I did return from 4 to other games, even like with worse graphic, with difficult combat system. It just, something about this game never hooked me. The characters are cute, don't get me wrong, they're better than other characters that I've seen. But compared to other Breath of Fire games, just they're not that memorable to me. So I like Ryu from the third game, probably the best Ryu out there.
He was pretty strong in 3.
He was pretty cool, pretty strong, very useful. I liked Ray, his attitude, and especially him going like 180 and then slowly returning around because realizing that being vengeful is not the answer. Gar, and for obvious reason, because he's really amazing. And if you really, really forced me, then I would say the adult Nina. Really, I couldn't stand young Nina. I
thought young Nina was absolutely hilarious. I mean, she cracked me up. I think I was like actually laughing out loud at various points. I mean, like, she's such a little shit, and when she and Ryu are running away from Balion Sunder, I thought it was a really great arc in the game. Really cool dynamic.
I don't know. Momo was cute, but not useful in combat. Days being awesome. But again, she only had very small screen time. I didn't.
But she did have a good showing in 3. I thought that it was a pretty strong, outing for the character.
Yeah,
I loved Momo. I thought Momo was really fascinating and adorable. I mean, just first of all, she's wearing like a graduation robe or whatever, which I thought was hilarious. But like they're really trying to emphasize that she's a scholar, and I thought that was cool. I actually pointed out on Twitter recently that I can't think of too many female characters whose intellect is really put on full display in RPGs, especially to the extent that Momo's is. Like, you can immediately name a huge list of male geniuses in RPGs, and unfortunately, the female geniuses aren't highlighted in the same way. And I thought it was really cool that Momo was the brains of the party in 3, and especially that she had this kind of a technological thrust, because the game was largely about these lost civilizations and the way that Miria was able to kind of harness that to control the world. And so I thought Momo was a very important key to understanding all of that and having kind of a perspective on what the ancient world was like and the importance of it.
I think in a lot of anime and JRPG, there are crazy scientist females. It just, I guess, in greater lack of, media and cartoon and stuff, they usually go for the scientist who is a guy. So yeah, I get you, but it's really brought on front that she's way more intelligent than smart, if that make any sense.
Okay, so who's your favorite NPC? Because as I mentioned, I think mine is Geist. I think he's just the most interesting. So who is yours?
The dolphin. This game, I would say my favorite villains are definitely Bilo and Sander. Their downfall was too quick and didn't make a lot of sense. And another good NPC was the Moa, the monster, the Noah.
Oh yeah. Oh, I felt so sorry for her.
Yeah, that was the most memorable thing to me from this game. It's like the first half of the game is kind of more memorable than the second. The second one was too mishmash of plot coming together. I don't know. I'm sorry. Like, I know a lot of you love this game. Just it was not my cup of tea. So I'll
I have
just
to agree
end
with you
there.
about Balio and Sunder being great because I really loved them. I loved to hate them. I mean, I genuinely hated them and wanted them to die a horrible, fiery death.
Exactly.
But they were great. I mean, they really worked as villains because, I mean, they were absolutely detestable. They were horrible. They were, willing to hurt little kids and just, completely irredeemable, but kind of, funny about it. They had great, comedic moments and
Very
they
sexual.
were obviously like the...
very sexual pawns, and they were very very pushed about, like, you couldn't believe that they are the lowest scums in the world. Like,
Yeah.
they're
like the
unbelievable.
worst, like jock wannabe alpha male stereotypes ever, but they did it really well. I mean, they were very believable.
Yeah.
If
If
my favorite villain,
if Teenager Mutant Ninja Turtle was not as PG-13 heavy, that's what Bebop and Rocksteady could have been.
for sure. My favorite villain is Miria, and that won't come as a surprise to anyone who's followed me on Twitter or talked to me on Discord or whatever. I think she's not only one of the best villains in the series, probably the best. I think she's one of the best villains in JRPG history, and I believe that really strongly. I think she's very underrated. I think many people don't understand her and don't understand the legitimacy of the threat that she represents, because she's a type of villain who is very subtle. She's the kind of villain who really believes that what she's doing is right, and that's the kind of villain that more often exists in the real world. Miria is a character who could very well, step into our own reality. I mean, she's convinced of what she's doing. She has convinced herself that she is the goddess that can take care of this world, and she's not kidding about that, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to see that vision of the world take place. And she offers protection, but it comes at the price of freedom. She's basically a slightly more fantasy parallel to the Mother Brain idea from Phantasy Star 2, or this kind of Isaac Asimov conception of a supercomputer that can take care of all of our human needs, but at the cost of a lot of our free will and ability to function independently. And again, she's, in my mind, a very scary villain because of that. Death Evan is scary in his own right in terms of what he represents. Miria's own iteration in the first game is a fun, more kind of Zelda-esque kind of, she's almost like a Triforce in that game, right? She represents your desire, your just unlimited desire, and the potential evil of the human heart, given that. But again, I think that Miria in the first game and Death Evan in the second game are slightly more hypothetical evils. They're more archetypal evils. Miria in the third game essentially really exists. I mean, she is the growing possibility that we are becoming too reliant on technology, that we are being lulled into a false sense of security and not really taking care of ourselves. And I think that as time goes forward, as technology progresses, as society becomes more and more dulled by things like social media, in a lot of ways, we're moving towards a world that's like Miria's world, and that's a genuine concern.
I never liked the 180 she did. Like, yeah, she did ended up proving evil at the end, but her remorseful and caring, I wish they'd just used someone else instead of Miria, or did it differently, because it's just weird to me that like someone who created something as malevolent as that heaven could be this kind of person, even if she is controlling. But again, this is me. I mean, that's another discussion for another time. I guess that's why I always felt like Breath of Fire 3 never truly connected with me, while the first and the second game are more connected than the third game. Okay, let's move on to the fourth game.
Let's do it. I was a big fan of 4. A lot of people are. I find that it's probably the second most popular game in the series among fans. Some people would argue that. Some people see it as being the most popular. Personally, I think it's the most polished game, and it's got great characters, both playable and non-playable. My favorite playable character is a little bit tricky to answer because I don't have a clear favorite like I do with the other games. I thought Ryu had a good showing here. Nina, was portrayed well. I like Cray pretty well, but he's a bit dry. Sias I love because he's a drunk or just kind of a bumbling idiot, depending on which version of the game you're playing. I love Ursula. I'm probably gonna have to say that Urshan is my favorite playable character from the fourth game because he genuinely cracks me up. And that's something that I find to be a really strong selling point in Breath of Fire, is that it's more often genuinely humorous than other JRPGs. Other JRPGs try to be funny. For my money, I find that none of them succeed as well as Breath of Fire. And Urshan's a really good example of it. I mean, you have to be pretty much without a soul to play Breath of Fire 4 and not find Urshan to be really fucking hilarious. I mean, just the whole conceit about how he seems to be referring to himself in the third person, and he's really not. And he seems like he's completely nuts, but he's really not in some ways. He's just seeing things that you aren't. He's aware that there's like a goddess inside of him, and he's not, communicating that very successfully. It's just really funny. I mean, like it's the kind of trope that would have fallen flat on its face if any other company had tried to run with it, but Capcom knows how to do this crap. I mean, they do it really well. And I love Urshan. And part of that is that I love Deus. She's a great character, and she had a great arc in this game. She's probably my favorite NPC in the game, unless another one comes to mind, but she's definitely one of my faves. And I thought she had a really good showing in 4, and Urshan was a strong part of that. It's really sad. I think it kind of shows how Deus is a bit of an asshole and how uncaring she can be, because when Urshan falls apart, after she's separated from him, she has no, sympathy for him. It shows no remorse about it. And I found that scene to be really touching because although he is just a piece of armor that has gained sentience and sapience because of being connected with one of the Endless, he's still a living thing ultimately, and I found him to be just really adorable and touching. So love Urshan. Again, Deus is probably my favorite NPC in the game. My favorite villain is Fao Lu, but everyone's favorite love to hate them villain is pretty high up there as well.
Yeah. My God. I think Rosso and Yuna? However you spell his name. They're definitely up there as the best villains. Again, you love to hate them because they could be someone you're familiar with in your real life.
Yeah, the unitypes really exist, and that's frightening.
And so the Rosso one. My God.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, you look at, I hate to say it, it's kind of dark to even talk about, but we think of science generally as being something that is beneficial and represents a lot of the highest ideals of humanity, but it can be turned to very, very twisted purposes and can represent the darkest of humanity as well. We saw that in Nazi Germany. And unfortunately, we have found that there are evil people in this world who are like Yuna. You know, Mingala is a good example. And I think that's why Yuna was so compelling. And I've made this point before. A lot of people don't agree with me, but I think that one of the biggest reasons that people remember Yuna and find him so infuriating is that he gets away. And that's his whole character. I mean, you know, his whole shtick is that he's this snake. He's this slippery character who just kind of, you know, slips away every time. I mean, he's got that weird, you know, ability to physically kind of remove himself from danger. And he's a very creepy character as a result. And, you know, you can see that he's genuinely driven by the desire to push things, you know, in terms of what science can achieve. And he simply has no moral compunction about the result of that. And that's why he's one of the best villains in the series. And at the same time, Fao Lu is as well. And they're neat counterparts and contrasts, because Yuna has no emotional or moral concern about what he's doing. And Fao Lu is somewhat similar in many ways, but he has a kind of a code. He's a little bit more of an honorable villain. He is very emotionally detached by human standards because he is a god. He's one of the endless and he's eternal. He sees our lives as fleeting, as he himself says. So he's not like Yuna, but he comes to have a touch of sympathy. You know, something about Mami's arc and her compassion for him awakens something in him, and he has a kind of a human moment, whereas Yuna never does. And I think that's, you know, one of the beautiful things about Breath of Fire 4. It shows that even the gods that we might imagine oftentimes have more humanity than we do. You know, that humanity can be very dark and very disturbing. So on that dark and disturbing note, Livnat, who is your favorite villain?
First of all, I want to say that there was something about letting us play as Fao Lu that got us a little bit more connected. I just wonder, like, what our feelings would be if they would have let us to play with Tipo or with Ray or even with Jed a little bit more. Because it does feel like it was intentional to insert us into the shoes of a god. And it is true that he is a villain, but he's growing. Even if you ultimately fight him, and the same with his equivalent from the 5th game, which we'll reach soon. The cast of Breath of Fire 4 are all good. None of them stands out too much. I did like Nina a lot, even though she seems a little bit not traditionally pretty. Like, she's more of a child. She's more clingy. It takes a while for her to be standing up for herself, but when she do, she's very on point. She can stand on her own, and she really won me, even though, like, she is different. It feels like her sister Alina is more like Princess Nina from the 2nd game, and she's kind of more like a Vamina character. But she's still, like, very feisty, very standing on her own. And I loved her way more than I loved Nina of Breath of Fire 3. Even though Nina from Breath of Fire 3 is definitely more pretty and definitely
So who's your favorite
more
villain?
feisty and cooler. Let's see. In terms of favorite characters, I didn't like Ryu too much. I felt he was blanking. Ursula was great. Cray was there, so there was not typical too much. My favorite villains would have to be Rosso. Damn, he was very bastard. And I don't know, I just hated Yuna too much to like him. I don't like him. I think he's very memorable with what they tried to do. But God, if I didn't want to punch him. And that short guy that
He
kept
was great
chasing
too, yeah.
Paulo
I forget
around.
his
I
name
forgot
as well,
his name. God, I'm blanking on his name. He was great as well, especially when you could see he was doing what he thought he was the best.
And on that note about Yuna, a very dark and disturbing character, let's move on to the dark and disturbing world of Breath of Fire 5, Dragon Quarter. It's a fairly divisive game, and I don't know if it's known for its characters so much as its kind of unique gameplay and setting, but it does have some interesting characters in it. So I struggled a bit to decide which of the playable characters was my favorite. Ryu has a really strong showing here. He's arguably, the most compelling he's ever been because obviously he and Nina kind of switch roles and he speaks. But I don't think that he was my favorite. Oddly enough, I think Nina was probably my favorite among the playable characters. And that's a tricky thing because we don't know a lot about her because she is unable to communicate for the most part. But I found her really genuinely sympathetic and loved her in combat, loved the magical utility that she brought, but I think she'd have to be my fave. Now, in terms of NPCs, that's a little more difficult for me to answer because I don't remember the plot of the game as well as I do 2 through 4. So I'm going to pause on that for a moment. My favorite villain, if you want to conceive of them as such, they may be kind of beyond villains in some ways. My favorite is probably Chitire. I found that whole concept about this malevolent entity kind of dwelling within Bosch and Ryu to be really compelling. And it gets at the whole overarching plot of Breath of Fire 5, right? Which is that human destiny is in many ways beyond our control. We have the whole D ratio thing and we've been driven underground and there's no light and no hope. And it seems that the only real potential for power, the only potential for escape is through death and sacrifice. Again, it's kind of this twisted inversion of Christianity, right? Where you need outside salvation, except that in this case it comes at a cost, and instead of the sacrifice of the deity, you have the sacrifice of yourself, potentially. Really found that whole dynamic in 5 to be very fascinating, but kind of weird, hard to understand. So, Livnat, what did you think about the characters in the game?
I loved that it was a big shout out to Breath of Fire 2 in terms of the Rangers. Any of the Rangers held their Zeno, I think her name. She was great until the part you had to fight with her, and then I hated her guts. I love Botch as a playable character. It just annoys me when he became this psychopath. Even though like it was fitting, but I really like his combat and the way he fought. Like every time he was in the party, I was very happy because he made things a lot more easier. I didn't understand the sexuality of Lynn too much. She was very sweet and caring, which seems both out of character but at the same time working. Nina was adorable. She's so adorable and she's so pretty, and I think like the game art doesn't give her enough credit. I mean, a lot of people probably hated her back in the days because she wasn't as attractive as the other Nina, but she's supposed to be a little girl, so it just fits. I mean, you could see right there she will grow up to be a very beautiful woman. And she was so sweet, much better than baby Nina from 3. Like, she was so there and so helping. I just wish they didn't take away her ability to talk, but at the same thing, I think that's what was her most endearing thing. I think
another thing fascinating about her was that she looks very sickly, which, makes sense given what has happened to her as a character, how she was, sort of brought into existence. And I find that fascinating from a kind of a psychological standpoint, because I think that people do tend to kind of shy away from her for that reason. And I think it speaks to an unfortunate but natural tendency in society and in human beings in general to be disturbed by signs of sickness. And it's an unfortunate thing because what happened to Nina was not her fault. And, it's something that is very crippling to her. And so, again, it's fascinating to me that people don't gravitate towards her as much as they do the other Ninas, when in a lot of ways she's more interesting.
There's a scene with her sitting on the operation table and her legs just moving back and forth, and just so adorable and so sweet. I just wonder what happened that she initially had to go to that surgery. Like, how did they convince her? Did they capture her? But at the same time, it looks like she was willing. It looks like she was willing and cooperative. Just, I wish, like, it was such a bad part. But at the same time, the switching of the role when Nina was the one talking so much in Breath of Fire 4 and Ryu was the blank silence one, and now it got reversed. Ryu Breath of Fire 5 is pretty cool. Like, he's really cool, and every time I look at him, I see Ryu too. So it definitely works, and it's pretty awesome. Elion was not as compelling and interesting as Faolu. He kind of seems like the more sad version of Faolu. He is the one who is not willing to push for what he believes. He's too afraid to make the final sacrifice. Odin was a little bit of a bastard, but ultimately he did what he did best. Butch, I hated his father a lot. I hated there was another one of the 5 general that like was really, really bad. I'm blanking on his name right now.
I did not find any of them very compelling, and that's very unfortunate because they could have been, and they really should have been. Like Elion, like you said, he should have been a much more memorable character, and he had the makings of one, but it just didn't pan out to me. I found Bosch really compelling. I actually legitimately hated him. I mean, when I played through the game, and I've only played it once, unfortunately, I need to correct that, but when I played through the game, he wasn't the kind of character that you love to hate. I mean, I legitimately hated him. I just wanted him to die. And then going back and thinking about it and watching, gameplay of the game, it makes me realize that he was a really great character. At first I found him to be kind of whiny and just genuinely annoying. And now, especially, Live Not, now that you filled me in on a lot of his backstory that I missed because I didn't do any of the D ratio stuff, I find him much more sympathetic and believable, and compelling for that reason. But
I think the worst villains of this game were definitely the Dark Rangers. My God, they felt like another version of Bilo and Sander. They were so terrible, especially their leaders. I'm blanking on his name, but oh my God, like, to do everything for the sake of, I don't know, pausing people from going up there. I just wish they explained more about why Chatiri hates Odin, and so forth. Like, what exactly?
Yeah, I think a lot of the appeal of the game is that it's mysterious, and the real inner workings of it all are kind of left to the player's imagination. Again, I think that's part of why it works, but it's also, while it's tantalizing, it's frustrating because there's really a lot that we don't know. But we're going to cap it off with Breath of Fire 5 for the moment. We're going to get to some of our audience commentary. We do a segment called Fishing for Questions every podcast, where we put out questions to all of you, our listeners. And this time we framed it a little differently. Instead of asking questions from our audience, we fielded a question to all of you. Who is your favorite character in Breath of Fire? And we had some great answers, and we're going to read them here. So, Premi at Aesthetic Prima on Twitter said, I love lots of Breath of Fire characters like Momo and Ran, but Ray will always be my favorite. He's amazing in battle, has a great design, and his role in Breath of Fire 3's story is emotional and moving. Seeing him again after the time skip is easily one of my favorite moments in the game. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we've talked a lot about Ray already on this episode, but phenomenal character. I mean, just... And, again, it shows that there's an embarrassment of riches in Breath of Fire because he easily could have been my favorite character in the game. And if he existed in any other series, he'd probably be my favorite character in that series. But in Breath of Fire 2, in Breath of Fire, he takes a backseat to Ran. But, yeah, I absolutely love his arc. Not gonna lie. Okay, Elbethium Gaming says, and I love this one. This is one of the first responses we got. Susie, just look how happy that little thing is. Oink, oink, oink. And it included a gif of Susie on the table when you've returned her to Township
She
with
does
the
have
Rangers.
a noise. Like,
Yeah,
it's so
she
cute.
does. That's little in the game. I love the SNES attempt at an oink. It's so adorable. I think Susie's very underrated. Very underrated. Okay, so Chan at DND RPG said, "Oh man, Ray is definitely my favorite. Honestly, all of the Breath of Fires have characters that we all want in an RPG that fill the classic JRPG trope." And I agree with that. I find it neat because Breath of Fire hits a lot of those tropes without leaning too heavily into it, without falling into complete stereotypes. Like, the characters are definitely types, but they've got real personality too, and it really kind of rounds them out. And again, we got more support for Ray here, so he's proving to be a big favorite. Sraimu at Kanipa Mupamu, I'm sorry, I probably completely butchered that, on Twitter says,
Damn.
"My favorite is Deus because I love how she is both one of the wisest characters in the series and also gives into all of her vices. She's technically a goddess, but a really human one, and she's super stylish."
Sure.
She is. She's absolutely stylish. And yeah, we've talked about how she's a goddess, but she kind of flies in the face of all the general conceptions about goddesses. She's a drunkard and she's a horn dog. Let's face it. Gavin Vengeance at Gavin Vengeance on Twitter, a good friend of the show, said, "If not Deus, then I'd have to say Deus with a smiley face. She's just the best. Awesome character design, memorable story moments, magical powerhouse, and a fantastic personality. She is all these things. She's great in battle and a great character." And yeah, very much so. And he includes the gif of her in for the scene where she's in her dream world and says, "Hey, I was having a good dream and you interrupted me." Classic stuff. It's a real fantasy of Live Not. She wants to have a bunch of naked dudes around her in a dream world.
I said if I could duplicate you.
I know.
And have you
I'm
standing as
teasing.
as a naked. That would be awesome. Just saying.
So, okay, Jordan Welker at Jord Welk says, "Either Sten or Jean for their pursue their own happiness outlooks. But when the
Pursue
time
their
comes,
own happiness. Outlook.
yes, but when the time comes, they'll do their best for their friends and family." I totally agree. I think Sten is a bit more interesting because of the implications of trauma in his backstory.
Exactly.
And Zavalry agrees and says, "Sten is such a great character. Starts off aloof, then you really see the real him as things progress." And yeah, I love Sten. I like him more when he comes in. I like the more happy-go-lucky side of him. I've said before, I didn't personally find the High Fort sequence as convincing as some people do, but it was definitely a fun, little arc in the game.
I was
Adam.
I was a little sad when there was this poll comparing who was like the least character you expect to be stuck with. One of them was Gobi and the other one was Stan, and I actually liked the segment with Stan way more than like starting anew with Gobi, but everyone hated on Stan because it's so unpredictable that you get him and usually very low level at that point. So
Okay, so the best username in history on Twitter, Adam being chased by the sun from Mario 3 says, "Urshan, how much personality they're given, and a rocket punch." Kat, being a female offensive lead, breaking an old RPG trope. I totally agree with that. Nina 2, being a badass mage with an awesome design. Ray, I like thief classes. Peiko, Little Onion grew on me. We all love Little Onion. And Deus, badass snake lady. All great choices. Agreed on all fronts. I think it's great that Kat does break that mold.
wait, what does he mean by breaking an old RPG trope, though?
That she's not only the fast, but one of the hardest hitting characters.
Yeah, but wasn't like the RPGs of the 90s being like that? Like I remember in Phantasy Star you have Ney, and there's a lot of other faster character like that, like Tifa being a powerhouse.
I certainly don't think. Well, Tifa was after Breath of Fire 2, but I certainly don't think that Kat was the first necessarily. But I think she was one of the more visible ones,
Okay.
one of the more well-known ones.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the very greatest Breath of Fire fans and a huge friend of the show, we love this dude, Mr. Thou, said, I've made it rather clear who my favorite is, Nina too. And if you know anything about Mr. Thou, you know this fact. But he goes on to say, but not just because of her insanely good looks and beautiful design, but her personality as well. She had a rough childhood, which made her shy and quiet, but she will still do anything for the one she cares about the most. And that it's well said, man. That ultimately, that's what it comes down to with Nina. She's got a heart of gold. Great, great character. Ake Belmont at Ake Trev Belm on Twitter says, definitely Kat. She's so strong and naive overall, providing good vibes to the party. Rand is also a character I love. He starts off stoic and not that interesting, but as his story develops, it's hard not to develop feelings for the guy. And, again, obviously Rand's a favorite of mine, so I have to agree, and Kat as well. They're two of my faves from Breath of Fire 2. Okay, Rogue Hound, a.k.a. Sergeant Bro, at Michael_Lechit on Twitter, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, says, I have to pick just one? I'm partial to Ryu, Nina, and Blue myself equally. You can't go wrong with those choices.
Exactly.
Matthew Richardson at Dead Waffles, another contender for best Twitter handle, says, Sten was my favorite as a kid and still is. How he battles, his spells, his story, and shaman form are great. Honorable mention to Rand. Love his punch and that moment with his mom. Also Ray because he's a badass. It's hard to pick one. They're all interesting. And I think that really encapsulates, how a lot of us feel about Breath of Fire. It has a hell of a lot of good characters, and it is hard to pick. Totally agree about Rand. I mentioned his punch animation earlier in the episode, actually, and totally, in agreement about that. So, okay, moving on to Discord. Gumi said, probably Deus because she's beautiful and she's not afraid to let you know it. Same with her powerful magic powers. Yeah, she's not a wallflower. She's a powerful woman and she embraces it. I think she's kind of a feminist icon of the series, and she ain't afraid to drink hard either. Okay, Alexander says, I'm not the best at argumentation, but hope someone finds this convincing enough. Sure, I think we'll have lots of Deus, and I must admit she's a really good character, mostly because she gets the most development throughout the series. But mine would be Ray. I love flawed characters in JRPGs, Kane from FF4 and Magus/Frog from Chrono Trigger being 3 absolute faves. But Ray is special. He is introduced as a thief whose goal is to survive and care about his family. The player is supposed to just accept it and roll with it. After all, thieves are a common class in Final Fantasy, D&D, and other RPGs. Breath of Fire 3 does a wonderful job at exposing both Tipo and him, showing the player the disgust McNeil's inhabitants feel towards the bunch through optional dialogue initially. And I think that's a really good point. It's sometimes hard to separate ourselves from the player perspective because, the point of view in any work of art, video game or film or book or otherwise, is going to inherently bias us. And so we all feel sympathy for Ryu and Tipo and Ray in Breath of Fire 3. But if Ryu and Ray and Tipo were stealing from us, we probably wouldn't feel so, kindly disposed towards them. And so, I'm in full agreement. I think that, as we mentioned before, I think Ray is really well developed. He's a wonderfully drawn character. Absolutely one of the best in the series, without a doubt. And you just gotta love him. Okay, so our final comment comes from Kate, my awesome and amazing sister, and this is through WhatsApp. She said, Kat, she's a complete and total badass from the very beginning of the game. The way the story unfolds and you find her is really interesting and cool, but I really loved her storyline with Taiga. She's honest, pure, good-hearted, and feisty as hell. She's everything I want to be. She's a literal fighter and gorgeous while doing it. And, I think that really captures Kat in a nutshell. I mean, she really is all of those things. She's feisty and badass and beautiful. And she's also kind of tender in the end. She's got a very kind heart. So
also, I want to do a honorable mention because I think we might have skipped on her because of going too fast with a lot of the series. And this is for you, Casey. Patty/Yua from Breath of Fire 2 is definitely a very amazing character. Definitely has our own fans for her being both a thief, but she's not actually a thief. She has a goal and things in mind, going through Karen's way. So, shout out. I wish she was playable. I would prefer her to Spare if I could choose, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm just saying if Capcom ever makes some kind of a prequel, sequel, remake for Breath of Fire 2 and makes Patty playable, I think that would be bank. It'd be easy money. Patty's definitely a great character, Patty / Yua. I think there are a lot of us who would like to know more about her. She's very mysterious, very intriguing, and just really well done. So I think that kind of winds us down here towards the end, and we're saving the final assessments for last. We're going to have to pick one character and one character only. And for me, it's a fairly easy choice, although there are a lot of great options. My favorite is Rand. Again, I grew up with Breath of Fire 2. It was the first game in the series that I played, and Rand just really immediately kind of touched my heart. So I love the big guy.
And to me, it's definitely Nina from Breath of Fire 2. I've grown to love her character, especially ever since I found out that there will be Nina in Breath of Fire 2, but she has black wings. I mean, what more you can get, She's just awesome.
She is, visually and character-wise and everything else. So, look, everyone, thank you so much for joining us in this celebration of one of the big things that makes Breath of Fire great, which is its characters. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope you'll come and find us on Twitter. Hope you'll subscribe here on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify or anywhere else great podcasts are found, hope you'll follow us there. And again, thank you all so much for the great input in this episode. It really meant a lot to us, and we're hoping you'll catch us next time here on Dragon Song.
Smell you guys later.